Welcome to the weekly podcast, which looks at every aspect of something which has or will at some point affect us all. And that is grief. Whether you've lost a loved one or are about to lose someone you love, or perhaps you're simply trying to support someone navigate their grief and don't know where to start or what to say, then perhaps this is the podcast for you. I'm Venetia Quick, and each week I'll be bringing you different stories and experiences of loss, love, hope, and at times humour. Welcome to this episode of the Grief Pod, and I'm joined by Keith Barry, mentalist, magician, author, and anything else you'd like to. Instagrammer, of course. You have your regular updates. You're almost daily at this point.
Yeah.
Keith, initially I got in touch because I wanted to talk to you about your granddad, Paddy, who you've spoken very openly about in the past few years. But since, obviously, then in the last few weeks, you lost your best friend and your dad, Ken. Do you want to maybe tell us a little bit about your dad first?
Yeah, look, I suppose I'm lucky that I had a great relationship with him. And, you know, a lot of people ask me, does magic or mentalism run in the family? It doesn't, but I suppose the performance aspect does. So my dad, way back, I'm 48 now, so 44 years ago, he was always, if Joseph and the Technicolor raincoat was on, he was Joseph. If it was Jesus Christ Superstar, he was Jesus. So he was in all the plays and theatrical productions down in Waterford. Right the way through to Tops of the Town would have been a big thing down there. So he was always the lead vocal in all of those. And then he was in the show bands, again, when I was young. And then we still laugh about it, but like when my mum and him got together, she basically said, "You can choose either showbiz or me," and he chose her. So
wow! So he gave it all up.
He gave it all up for mum. And look, childhood was great. You know, as I said, a great upbringing. I have one sister, so it was just me and her. And then I suppose, like anybody, in the teenage years were challenging for a bit. It's probably obviously looking back on it in reflection more me than him. So I suppose we had a strained relationship for not that long, maybe 3 years, I'd say, 15 to 18, that awkward kind of age. And then after that, we kind of grew and bonded more than most, I think, father-son relationships. And what I mean by that is, like, he was also my best buddy to the extent that he became all of my friends' good friend as well. So he was one of the lads. So none of the rest of the lads would have their dads with them on the fishing trip, but Ken would always be there. Do you know what I mean? And you know, similar to, you know, if we went to a nightclub, like I have stories where, you know, my dad went on back in the day. We were talking about back in the day a few minutes ago. So I'm talking about before we had kids even. You know, dad has been known to go on a 36-hour bender with me and Mairead. You know what I mean? And nobody else's parents be there. It's all we can, you know.
But you told that nice story on Instagram the other day about sitting on the swing till 7 o'clock in the morning having a few cans. Yeah, his whole thing, he used to love staying up all night and singing the Dawn Chorus. It was actually a thing of his. He did it alone many times with when we were brought up in Williamstown, Waterford. We were on about I'm going to say about a third of an acre maybe, so it was a big garden, think of it like that. We always had boxer dogs, so you know, not every week, but every couple of weeks it wouldn't be you know, strange to see Dad at 6 o'clock in the morning with the boxer dog next. We always had boxer dogs in my mind, and he'd be swinging on the swing, and I was young at the time with the dog. But then as we grew on into life, I'd be found on the swing with Dad, sometimes with a dog, and sometimes even later in our 30s. Probably, I'm going to say, I don't know, maybe 13 years ago. I remember there was one time that my wife and my mum came downstairs. It was in my house. They were staying overnight, and they came downstairs. They couldn't find me or Dad, and then they went out in the back garden at 7 o'clock in the morning. The two of us were on the singing the Dawn Chorus. That was a thing of his. So yeah, look, we were best buddies, best friends, and yeah, he just passed very recently. Like at the time of recording this, today it's probably 2.5 weeks ago now. Wow. So still, obviously, just like yesterday.
Yeah, it's raw, but But weirdly, at this moment in time, I'm okay with it. I think I have the emotional intelligence to know it's going to come in waves. So it's not like that I'm immediately over the death of my dad. But he was a very pragmatic individual, and he passed that down to me. He was a very sarcastic individual, and he passed that down to me as well. So I think that helps you deal with grief.
Yeah, because he was battling cancer.
Yeah.
Was it for long or
about 2 years?
Okay,
give or
so
take
a
about 2
relatively
years.
short amount of time.
Yeah. Like he'd bad stage when he was diagnosed. It was stage 4 lung cancer, which had metastasized, if that's the right way of saying that. So it was kind of in his spine and a few other places as well. So it was a bad diagnosis, and he never smoked. So it was strange that he got lung cancer, but it turned out to be some mad genetic thing that happened, and the doctor just looked at me straight away and said non-hereditary when she was telling us that, and there's a flip side to that people don't know. It turns out that if you're a smoker, there's like, I don't know, dozens if not hundreds of treatments for lung cancer. But if you're a non-smoker and it's this genetic thing, there isn't that many treatments. So he ended up on a...
Just because of the way it builds the
cancer? Think money. Let's think about it logically for a minute.
Yeah,
there's millions of smokers have...
me trying to look the nice way.
No, there's millions of smokers.
Yeah.
And this is not a conspiracy theory. This is just stats. Do you know what I mean? Just think of it statistically. Like, there's millions of smokers, and look, I'm not anti-smoking. If you want to smoke, smoke. But we just know that millions of people are going to get lung cancer from smoking. So therefore, they have to solve that problem. They solve using drugs. So they get millions and millions of euros and dollars from those drugs. There's lots of different drugs and lots of different treatments for people who smoke. But with the genetic anomaly that my dad had, it's a very rare form of lung cancer. So therefore, there's not that many treatments for it. So they blast them with chemo and radiation and all that kind of stuff that they do. And it worked initially, but it only worked for a short period of time. And then they were like, listen, this is not working anymore. And then he got on a trial drug. So that was kind of the trajectory of his treatment, and he was on that trial drug until he passed away, pretty much. Look, the trial drug kept him alive, but he had no quality life for a long time. I think that's part of the grieving process that right there is like, I mentioned to you, unfortunately, a friend of mine, his brother just passed away recently, and but his brother dropped dead. Now his brother had some underlying medical issues, but he did drop dead unexpectedly. So he's going to grieve that in a whole different way than I am. Do you know what I mean?
There's the shock and the trauma because the suddenness of it. During your dad's illness, when he was having all the chemo and the radiation and all the different treatments, how did that change your relationship with him? Or did it?
I don't think it did. I think it just made me more understanding, a little bit more understanding. Of what he's going through. I think we had such a good relationship. Like, even after the service that we had from him, like the one thing that came through as a through line is that we were, and I hate saying this about myself, but people are saying that we were the golden standard of what a father-son relationship should have been. And that doesn't mean we didn't have our arguments and our troubles and trials and tribulations. I just mean, the reason I say that is because I almost had a sixth sense about him through his illness. And what I mean by that is he could communicate his concepts and ideas to me without having to talk too much, because he was so drained and he was so tired and he was so sick. But he only had to make a gesture or look at me a certain way, and I knew kind of what to do. I knew whether to go get a nurse or a doctor for him, and I knew why he needed them. Like, he'd be trying, because he couldn't really talk very much because it was lung cancer, so it was affecting his vocal cords and so on. So he'd be trying to say something, and an ordinary human being wouldn't have been able to figure that out. But I would immediately just say, Dad, stop, relax. And I think it just made me really caring. But I don't think it changed our relationship. He went into his own bubble to try and protect us. And I think everybody found that difficult, especially my mum, because he kind of just emotionally tried to retract. And that was his method of trying to protect everybody, knowing that he was dying. I think he obviously knew he was going to die. So in his mind, he thought, how will I protect them? Well, I'll start to shut off my emotion now and step back. And I think that was difficult. But I don't think my relationship ever really changed. I suppose it changed a little bit insofar as, if I think about it, like in December when he was really sick, I kind of became his carer, which he didn't want, I didn't want. But it's a role you just kind of fall into. Now, my mum was obviously his primary carer. But then, I was helping him in and out of the bed, and on and off a commode. There's no dignity in it.
Yeah.
Look, he was saying to the doctors and nurses, give me a cyanide tablet and I'll go. And at the end of it, he was just like, let me go. I have to tell you, like, I haven't looked into it's the first time we've had to go through this, but like, even though, we keep people alive, you wonder to what effect. And what I mean by that is, like, my dad would have chosen to die 6 months earlier if he was given a choice, but there is no choice. So, I think that's an issue.
Yeah, no, and I there's the whole obviously question about euthanasia and all this sort of stuff, in different countries.
Yeah.
But I sort of would agree with you, because my dad was in Michael's, and he was sort of a Lazarus type person anyway, like just who had a Whipple's operation that really should have only given him 18 months and gave him 5 years. Got COVID in hospital when he was 80, sort of, shrugged off that. But then at the end was in and out and in and out, and then just no real, quality of life at all. Just in
that was my dad
out.
For weeks.
And you just go, why? Because he was miserable.
Well, my dad was miserable. The joy was gone. He kept saying, this isn't me. And he was fully cognitively aware the whole way through until he died, right? So his brain was 100% there. He could tell you what drugs he was taking, even though he was probably taking 20 different drugs, right, in a day. He could tell you what they all were, what the volumes were, all the rest. And he was just like, this is not me. And he kept saying, just let me go. And there's no way to do that in Ireland. So, they don't expedite the process. But I do believe, like, if you're cognitively aware, like, if there's a system you have to go through where a psychologist comes in and goes, yep, his mind is sound. And if the doctors come in and go, yep, he's only going one way and it's that way. Like, shouldn't we have the ability to allow people to die in dignity in Ireland and not have to suffer? And all my dad did for months was suffer and then try to protect us. But by doing that, he retracted into his bubble. That made it hard for my mum. It made it hard for me and my sister. And it was difficult, and I don't know what our way to put it.
I mean, you're almost grieving them before they're gone.
Yeah, well, we
Do you know what I
did.
mean? Because
we did. And I think he grieved himself nearly. You know what I mean? Like, he was like, Jesus, just let me go. So look, I think eventually he controlled his own outcome. What I mean by that is, he drains in both lungs, and his left lung was completely gone, pretty much. Like, he was dead with cancer. And they were draining these lungs, and they were doing what they can. So I'm not knocking the medical professionals. I mean, their job is to keep you alive. But it was painful doing that to him every day, and it was draining him physically, mentally. He wasn't getting any upside to this. So then eventually he went, you know what, no more treatment. And he knew then there was only one way this is going to go, and then he just had to wait. So he did ultimately control his own outcome. But that must have been so difficult for him as well. Think about it logically, like, to have to push yourself basically into death. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And I don't think we should have to do that,
No. But then from the other, and we're just talking about your friend's brother there, who dropped dead, as they say. But I'm wondering, with your granddad as well, obviously that was horrendous.
Yeah.
What happened to him. There's the whole thing of closure, and I wonder, when somebody dies suddenly, do you get the same closure as perhaps you do when you know it's going to happen, and it happens more as it should, somebody's sick and they pass away, rather than this sudden.
Well, I suppose for context, for people out there who don't know, like, my grandfather was 82. He was actually smoking a cigarette. I think it was Benson and Hedges or Johnny Blue or John. I don't even know cigarettes, but anyway, he was having a cigarette, and he was having a can of Carling Black Label, and he was in his house, and his alarm on. He had 3 locks on his door, and a number of people, we were told by the guards, there was a number of people, broke his front door down, and they beat him up, and he died 3 or 5 days later. It gets all blurry in your head, and that was in 2000, and I'm going to say 2009, I think. So it's gone back a bit, and he died a couple of days later. So that's a real traumatic experience because it's not a death that anybody should, but it's not a death that anybody should have to deal with in a family, because it's not just the shock of him dying, it's the shock that he didn't die of natural causes either. And then, you're thinking you got to catch these people, and then I got noisy in the media because I wanted to catch these people and get these people caught, and then
but you're angry, so that's
I was thrashing out, and I was really, really close to my granddad as well, right? And I was absolutely very angry, and then it's a long story, but anyway, the state pathologist at the time came out. All injuries consistent with a fall was the autopsy, as if nothing had ever happened in the house, considering the fact that his arm was already bleeding when he rang the guards, and his arm was broken, it turns out, when he rang the guards. And then a secondary incident had to have happened because he was found with head injuries outside his front door. So there was 2 separate incidents that 100% had to have happened. But then state pathologist comes up, all injuries consistent with a fall. Then we had to have an inquest. I challenged the state pathologist at the inquest. I actually won the challenge. This is not in the press. So I won the challenge because he said he couldn't stand over his own statement, because he was told by somebody who he couldn't tell us who the somebody was, that Paddy Barry had locked himself in his front living room and had no interaction with the burglars. So I said, where did you get that information from? And he said, I don't know. So he couldn't stand over it, and then he had to rewrite his own report. And then the jury came out, and they came out with a statement to say that the incident that happened in Paddy Barry's house led directly to the cause of his death. And they had to get legal advice. They told me this afterwards. They had to get legal advice. That was the strongest wording they could put in. I'm sure we saw him. He's beaten black and blue. He'd broken arm. His head was hit against the ground or against the wall. We don't know. And again, all the way through to somewhere 2009, 16 years, no one was ever caught. And the crazy thing is,
and yet it's more than one person.
Oh, but the wilder thing is, the guards went. The guards asked me to go quiet out of the press because they said I was affecting the course of the investigation. Second, I went quiet. We never heard from the guards ever again, and it's not an open case, so they just didn't bother. Well, it's supposed to be an open case, right? But nobody's bothering to investigate it. But in my mind, Paddy Barry was murdered. End of story. He was murdered, and therefore, should I be chasing that? But here's the thing. Back to that. You grieve, and then you're shocked, and then you get angry, and then you grieve, but then you realise this is consuming me for years. And then you have to make a choice again. You have to go, well, am I going to let this consume my life now? And some people do. Yeah. And they look for justice, but that becomes their life. And I thought, this can't become my life. I can't let it consume me. Because
so how have you found closure for it?
I haven't, but I haven't let it consume me. So look, again, apparently, we've been given a new Garda liaison officer after all these years because, again, I got a bit noisy, like I sometimes do. Like on this podcast, somebody... But what it really is, and I don't mind openly saying, it's a PR containment for the guards is what happens. Now, I'm not anti-guards. I'm talking about my own specific... not my own, but the incident that happened to my grandfather was not properly investigated. And the Waterford Gardaí didn't bother calling us for years. And now apparently we've been given some new Garda liaison officer who, through one of my cousins said, oh, Keith can call me if he wants. I mean, why hasn't that guy called me? And the reason I'm mouthy about it is, one, because I'm in the media, but two, I was actually really close to my granddad, super close beyond.
I think if that happens to a family member, you go all out. Do you know what I mean? It's like if somebody hurts one of your kids or whatever.
Well, that's it. But then again, but to answer your question, I haven't found closure. It's always going to be an open wound. But all you can do is stitch the wound. And then it'll open again. And you get angry again. And then you stitch it again. But if I decided to make it my life's mission to catch the people that are responsible for that, it comes at a cost. And the cost would be, maybe I'm not spending as much time with my own kids. Maybe my career, because you have to put time and energy into that. I mean, here's the crazier part. Just to wrap this part of the conversation. The crazy part is somebody in Waterford is still, all these years later, spray painting information.
Oh, I read that
all over
on the
Waterford.
Hospital wall or something.
Oh, it was on the hospital wall twice, I might add. So in Arkeen Hospital, twice somebody spray painted, and I have this photographic evidence on my phone because the cleaners took a photograph before they cleaned it off, and I informed the guards. And again, I'm like, you don't need to be Inspector Clouseau to look at the cameras in Waterford Regional Hospital and see who went in and spray painted that, right? But then it's been done since. on a wall somewhere in Waterford as well. And basically, it says the same stuff every time. It names an individual who it says, investigate this person, they're responsible for Paddy Barry's death. So that's why apparently we have a new Garda liaison officer. And, you know, I haven't even rang him because, to be honest, I was dealing with Dad's illness for so long. Again, you know, you have to be careful of your own energy. You can end up just, you know.
And it must have been hard for him as well, then, never to have
had
that, like, to be able to put it to rest.
Yeah, because when the last set of kind of photographic evidence, and of course everybody contacts me because I'm in the social media and in the industry, but like ultimately I got sent this photograph not that long ago, I'm going to say within the last year, the latest photograph that was, I think it was in Tremor, somebody spray painted it again. It's obviously the same person, I would imagine. And ultimately, I showed Dad and I said, look, do you want me to follow up with this and do something about it? Or do you want to do something? He said, look, I just don't have the energy anymore, Keith. And I think he felt a profound sadness, actually, when he was passing away, or towards when he was passing away, that nobody'd ever been caught for the death of my grandfather. And I think there was a certain level of regret on his own behalf that maybe he hadn't done enough. He'd done as much as I've done, but there will be, like, if I know I'm dying today, there will be a level of regret in my mind, wondering, did I do enough? Should I be ringing that Garda liaison officer in my car on the way home today from this podcast? Probably, but then part of me thinks, here we go again. You see, I think it takes.
It's a full-time job.
I think it'd need to take a hungry, savvy, young investigative guard who goes, this is bullshit. Like, why isn't anybody being caught for this? And why is nobody paying attention to this? And why is no more energy being given to this? Because when you look at other cases that are out there in the public eye, and I guess it's probably because they're in the public eye that they get attention. Like, this should be, I think there's a cold case division within the guards, and this should be in there, should be reopened, it should be reinvestigated. And the fact is that, you know, if you thought it was dead, well, all of a sudden there's this stuff being spray painted all over the place. So somebody's feeling guilty. And actually, if you also think about it, you know, yes, it's 16 years ago. I don't know what age those people were when they did what they did to my grandfather. But let's imagine that one of them might have been in their mid-30s. I don't know. They might have been in their 50s, but they might have been in their mid-30s. Like, that means they're only hitting around 50 now. So what are they doing? And I can't imagine they went on to do great things with their lives after that. Do you know what I mean? But you know what I mean? So now, even if they were caught now, it could have a beneficial effect for society to lock these people up. But being honest, the Waterford guards don't want to know. So there you go.
You talked,
and that's just me being blunt. Like, I can't protect.
I just think it's sort of when there's something like that, where you read of other cases where sort of young women have gone missing or whatever, and then you see later on, or young guys, and their parents pass away, and they never got to know the truth, or they never got to bury their child.
That's the same with us. Yeah. We'll never. I don't think we'll ever know, to be honest.
It just feels like it's that the grief continues. It's always sort of there. It's always there anyway when you lose someone, but it's just sort of a little bit more heightened.
Well, it is, because he should never have met that end. Like, he was super healthy. He used to walk 7 miles 3 days a week. 82, you know, and he was living a nice. He used to go to the pub every couple of nights. Like, he had a good life, and he was surrounded by family down there. So, like, his father, who I knew as Pop lived till he was 95. Wow. So there was good genetics going on there, like, you know. Yeah. My dad didn't inherit those genes, unfortunately, but there you go.
Maybe they'll pass on.
Maybe.
Yeah. You were talking as well the other day about sort of the guilt of not feeling griefy enough. Yeah. And actually, that's something that when I saw that, it sort of resonated with me, because I have that with my dad quite a lot, that I feel, I suppose, because when I lost Martin, it was such a huge thing, and of course losing my dad was as well, but I couldn't and still can't really get to that place that you feel you should be inside, where you're going, oh, I feel absolutely awful today. I feel really sad. I can't stop crying. I can't get out of bed. And there is a sort of guilt with that.
But I think what I've realised is there's 1,000 ways to grieve. And everyone has to find their own way. And it's very nuanced. So my mum is grieving in a different way than me. I'm sure my sister's grieving. We're all grieving differently. I think for me, part of it was relief, right? Because he was in so much pain, so much anguish. And let's be honest, like some people, I know a lot of people who are just kind of meandering through life. Like they don't really have a zest for life. They're alive, they're living, but they're not really, they don't have a hunger and a zest for life. My dad had a hunger and a zest for life and curiosity and joy and adventure. So when you see somebody like that go downhill as much as he went down, like you do, like we mentioned earlier, you do grieve along the way. And then when he died, I cried for, like, I actually thought it was okay when he died. And in the moment I was. And then I realised I got my car and just the tears were like nearly hitting the windscreen. Do you know what I mean? On the way home. And I was just bawling on the way home. Yeah. And then I went home. I think I had one drink and then I went to bed. And then I got up the next day. And then I think I pretty much cried for 2 days solid. Not in bed with grief, but just I kept crying on and off for 2 days. Until I kind of couldn't cry anymore. And I don't know if I've cried since those 2 days. I've gotten weepy for sure, but that's the point I was making. I was like, should I be unable? Like people keep saying, be kind to yourself and take time to grieve, and I'm like, well,
but there's no timeline.
What do they want me to do? Do they want me to lie in bed and cry into my pillow? I mean, that's just not me.
Then,
but I'm sure that is other people. Like they're just so heartbroken and stricken with grief that they have to do that. But it's not me, and my way is just dealing with it day on day. But a friend of mine, one of my good friends, just asked me before I came in here, like he just rang me and he's just like, "How are you doing?" And I was like, "I'm actually fine," you know. But I think I have the emotional intelligence to know that it'll come in waves as well. Like I know I'll get trigger points. You know, there's a lot of spiritual people out there who believe that, like, when they see a robin, that's actual, like, spiritually.
Do you believe that?
No,
Do you have any...
no. But I love now. He was my dad. So my dad wasn't particularly spiritual. He wasn't religious at all. Like we did non-religious ceremony. It was actually lovely. I have advice for people on funerals.
Go on.
Because this is recent, right? So I'll give the advice in a second. So remind me to come back to advice on funerals. I've got very specific advice. But ultimately, he did have a thing where he would always see a robin and he would just see it symptomatically as somebody who had passed. And he would just see it as a nice memory. Like he never believed it was the soul of the individual. He never believed it was anything other than just, oh, there's Paddy. But he would do it in a joking way. And every single time I see a robin, I always, I love birds. So I always have like a little bird feeder in the back garden. I've had robins for months. So it's not like they just all of a sudden turned up, right? So I know they're not dad. They're not dad, you know what I mean? Like, but every time I see a robin now, I smile and I think of them. And I think it's a beautiful thing. Yeah. It helps you grieve. Like it's like it actually helps, right? Because I just smile. And sometimes I feel that sense of sadness for a second and then I sit with it and then I just smile again. Like I haven't cried looking at robins, but every time, I said it to somebody today, like I know that's just not going to be a passing moment. I know that every time I see a robin around the world, wherever I am, I'm always going to think of dad. And I think that's a beautiful thing.
It is, yeah.
It's a nice thing.
Yeah.
And I know other people, when they see a feather, they might think of somebody, like there's sort of various ways. Some people are actually superstitious about that. Brilliant, if that's your thing.
I do think there are little signs that pop up along the way. Do you know what I mean? Like without sort of realising it.
Yeah, but see, I'm like my dad. I'm not like, I'm very happy to say I don't know if there's an afterlife, but even in death, dad was just like, you know, I'm going downstairs. The party's, if there's a heaven and hell, I'm going down the way. The party's down there. It's much better downstairs than it is upstairs. Yeah. And he was like, well, I'm gone. And his whole thing was like, and this is just his own personal wishes, if you want to call it that. He was basically like, and I had these conversations. I think this is important. I had these conversations with him, difficult conversations, when he was really, really sick. I was like, what do you want? And he's like, crematorium party. And no one's allowed to wear black at the party, colour only. I was like, okay. And I was like, is that it? He's like, that's it. Just, and his thing was no priests. I was like, okay, I'll honour that. So yeah, so that's the way we did it. But
did you do a celebrant or did you?
So on that, right? So just advice for funerals. Number one, funeral director, I suppose. They are key for taking away the pain in the moment. But they're not a one size fits all. So from the hospice, knowing that he was going to go in the next 24 to 48 hours, first piece of advice, I got ahead of myself. I rang a couple of funeral directors. And I just didn't like the cut of some of their jibs. I just knew it was just business for them, right? Which I get. It's a business, right? But I wanted somebody who at least felt like that half a heart, you know? And I just got a guy on a call. I got his phone number actually scribbled to me on a piece of paper from a funeral I'd been at a couple of weeks before. Do you know what I mean? They just say, call Owen, he'll organise everything. And I did. And by the way, I'm not saying this, like, I've no affiliation with them and I'm paying them in full. Yeah. So, like, it's not like a sponsorship deal with a funeral director. No.
You're not sponsored by Owen.
No, but Owen and O'Reilly funeral directors out in Maynooth, they did a great job and he took away all the pain. You know what I mean? So I think just finding one, but getting ahead of yourself, I thought was key. Because he just put me at ease to say, okay, look, he asked for a couple of pieces of information. He said, okay, there's not a whole lot more we can do until Dad passes. And he was very careful and nice the way he said it. But I got ahead of myself in a good way. So I was kind of prepared. And then I called him and he just kind of took care of everything, took care of booking the crematorium and all those different things. But then the second part is, if you have the opportunity, like I did, having that tough conversation is really good. So honouring my dad's wishes was nice for me. Like for him to tell us, you know, for example, like it threw my mum for a loop. My dad saying, "No one swear black at the funeral." Like no one was expecting that. It didn't surprise me, but it seemed to surprise everybody else because he liked a good suit. He liked to go to funerals where everybody was dressed in black, but just not his. Yeah, he wanted colour. So like I put out a text to everybody. I was like, okay, everybody has to wear colour. And people were like, really? I was like, yeah, you got to wear colour. So like I wore a mad shirt and I was wearing like fawn jeans and white, like stuff I would actually never wear. White sneakers and like I had this like colourful shirt with a bull and red roses all over it. At my dad's funeral, I thought it was deadly, like that I could just wear what I wanted, you know. And then everybody was wearing colour, so that was lovely. The second thing is, back to your question, did I have a celebrant or they call it humanist as well? Is that right? Yeah, and I was so as default, people go to get a humanist or a celebrant if it's a non-religious ceremony. And I was going to do that. I got a number of somebody. I did call her. She was away. And then after I called her, I was like, hang on here a minute. I'm going to have to sit with this person for maybe up to 2 hours to describe my dad. I'm going to have to email them a big long-winded email to describe my dad. You know, or whatever way they're going to have to do it. I'm going to have to tell them all about Dad. And then they might stand up and mess it up. I don't know who this person is. I'm sure they're coming from a nice place in their heart. But like, I don't know what way they're going to deliver this to his friends and his family. So I just thought, I'll do it myself. Now, people might think, oh, but yeah, you're a public speaker and a performer. It's easier for you. It was my dad. Yeah. It's not easier, right? Yeah. I would encourage people to do that, though, because it was beautiful. It was a beautiful thing to be able to do that. And it was difficult. And, you know, I think if you break at the start, it's going to be really difficult. So I managed to hold it together. My only thing was, hold it together for the first 5 minutes and then I can push through. Yeah. So I did. But it was lovely because I could just speak from the heart and just talk about him and you know, I gave people, you know, people who knew him later in life, I gave them an insight into his earlier life. People who knew him earlier in life, maybe hadn't seen him in years, gave them an insight into later in life. So it was just really nice to do it myself. So I would say to people, like, you know, don't think you always have to go down a route of, you know, traditional church or traditional celebrant or humanist. You can actually do these things yourself. But I didn't even realise it was an option.
It is more personal because there's nothing worse than going to a funeral and the priest gets, I've been to funerals where it was a youngish mother died and the kids were one of my kids' ages and they forgot one of the kids and they called the other kid the wrong name. It was just
but it's horrific, isn't it?
It was a young person. It would have caused sort of.
Well, this is it. Like
a little bit of humour, but it was just horrendous.
Well, I was just talking to somebody recently that they said that the same thing with their dad. They hired a humanist. He was over in Wales. They're Welsh, and he just said it was a complete unmitigated disaster because he just said his dad wouldn't have wanted the way the humanist. And I'm sure the humanist again was coming from a good place, but he just wouldn't have wanted that delivery. Yeah. Whatever. So there was that, and then the other thing is, we had the party, and the party was amazing. And the other tip I have for people, and I know people have their own opinion on this, we had a closed coffin. You know, there's no benefit for people looking at a sick, dead corpse. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like,
I know.
Like, to go up and touch a cold dead. Like, I've seen many, too many probably for my age, being honest with you. Like, I've been at quite a few funerals. I'm like,
I don't get it.
Yeah, but
I understand that people want to come, and if it's in the house, the person's in the house and they want to call over and whatever.
Yeah, wake is an interesting tradition, right? So I get that.
Yeah.
But my dad died of cancer. He didn't look like himself.
You're not having your best luck. But
but he didn't look like himself at all.
Yeah.
And he had edema on his legs, so they couldn't even put shoes on him if they wanted to.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I said it to him again. I had that conversation with him. Did you want an open or closed coffin? By the way, with that request, I'd already said it to my mother, this coffin ain't going to be open. Like, this is going to be a closed coffin, even if he requests for it to be open.
Yeah.
But I said, what the hell? I'll ask him. And he said, no. And just the way he couldn't really talk that well, but he was just like, no. But I can say it the way he meant it. He's like, no. He's like, I don't want to be crying over my dead body. No, just close the coffin. Literally. So it's great that he said that, though, Yeah. But again, I would just say to people, really think about whether you should have that coffin open or closed. For me, it should be, if the person was ill for a long period of time, they don't look like themselves. And when they die, I mean, it was weird. Like, even though he was really sick and looked terrible, when he died, he still somewhat looked like him. And then, shout out to Black Rock Hospice. They were amazing, really lovely. And there's a girl in there, I think her name was one of the nurses that was with us at the end. I'm pretty sure her name was Ivy. She was lovely. And but she laid him out, so they do that, right? So it took about a half an hour, I guess, to lay him out. But when we went back in, like, it just didn't look like him at all, and that's just death. It wasn't like she'd laid him out beautifully. But so I would say, closed coffin, colourful. Like, don't think you have to do it one way.
Yeah.
And you don't have to do it my way. But actually, just be a little bit creative about death. That's weird.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Like, down at Black Rock Hospice, like, you could ask them if you ever met them. I mean, not that you're ever going to be, but they were like, you guys, the way you talk about death and your dad. And I was like, but doesn't everybody talk like this? Like, no. But that's just the pragmatism, the sarcasm and all the rest of it, like, coming in. Like, even when he died.
But that's his humour coming out.
Exactly. Even when he died. So with what I do, I've done a lot of research into past life regression, a lot of research into what happens when you die, near death experiences, and the through line with near death experiences, no matter what any of us believe in, but the through line and what people describe is that they do describe themselves floating and hovering over their own body. Spiritually, it's known as a Ka. But anyway, hovering over their own body, looking down at the people who are there. And that lasts for 2 to 4 minutes where they're hovering over. So, if they're alone, they're looking at themselves alone. And this is the through line. But anyway, when my dad passed away, and it was me, my mum, my uncle, and my sister were there, and he passed away, I literally just turned up. I turned up toward the ceiling and I just waved at him. I'm just waving at a ceiling in Black Rock, but I was just in case.
Yeah.
See you, Dad. And it was. But that's my kind of.
Is,
and I think
you have gallows humour as well, type thing.
But I think it's important for people out there who are struggling to know it's okay to laugh in grief. It's okay to laugh, and my dad was the first to say it. It helps you. It's like therapy for you, because if you just spiral down the sadness of it all, I do know. More men in particular that I want to know who spiral so far down into grief that it turns out into depression, and their whole personality changed permanently from that death with their dad. And I kind of made a promise to myself in his death that I wouldn't do that. And to stop me from doing that, or to help me through, it's those moments of sarcasm, those moments of tears and sadness when they come, but then also that laughter as well, because it just helps you through. And then leaning on your friends is so key,
Yeah, no, it is. And even, because they're all dying to have a bit of a joke as well. And especially if the person was a funny person. Do you know what I mean? It seems odd not to. And the old beatifying of people. Like, it's okay to say they were grumpy bollocks if they were. Do you know what I mean?
I have a top tip.
Go on.
That I completely forgot. Like, this is the biggest tip. And everyone loved this. And I was doing it for everybody. Not really my dad. So basically what I did was I got on my phone and I just got as many photographs and videos of him as I could. And I asked some people to give me some as well. And I just went into CapCut and I cut together a reel, like a video. It was about 30 minutes long, I guess. So the first half of it was really kind of just photographs, and the second half was him singing drunkily in bars and parties and whatever, right? But then, those you know the way people get mass cards.
Yeah.
So I got wallet cards. So they're nice and small. People can fit in the pocket. On the front of it was him in his pajamas with a bottle of champagne because that was his character. Right.
Yeah.
So no serious photographs. But on the back of it, I put a QR code. So everybody at the funeral got one of these, and then when they got home, they could scan the QR code, which brought them to the video. So when they're at home, they can all look at the video. And you don't need, like, if you're not good with technology, like I'm not great at this stuff, like I just hacked it together. But you don't even need to hire somebody. For sure, out of your friends and family, someone will know how to hack together a video.
Yeah. And
then you can just put it up you can put it up anywhere. I put it up on my, just privately on my YouTube channel where nobody else can access it unless you've got the QR code. But everybody said that was just one of the best days because everybody did watch it.
Yeah, because you like doing, that's one thing, photos at a funeral is really nice to have.
Yeah.
But I remember with my dad, they were like Martin, we did all bells. Sure, the vicar called it his gig. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
AC/DC going down the aisle, all sorts.
Oh, well, we had rockin' all over the world.
Did you?
Yeah.
Status quo.
Yeah. Like Dad said, play rockin' all over the world at the end, and we did. And I had a live musician as well. That's the other thing.
Brilliant.
Live musician.
You have to.
Maurice Culligan, amazing musician from Galway.
Wow. But that's like the one thing I think with like little videos or photos, it's really personal.
Yeah.
And I just remember Dad, there was like, oh, you can't put it there, you can't put it here, you can't. So it was shoved over in the corner, and I spent hours going through photos and getting them up. And I was like, sure, no one can see it.
I know.
QR code.
But the QR code is a way forward, I can tell you, because everybody did, like, people texted me afterwards and said, I'm sitting here in bed crying looking at your dad. But then other people were saying, oh my God, that was so much fun and laughing at it. And it affects different people in different ways.
And something they can go back and look at any point. And
well, that's it. They can
really
scan
nice
it like down the line.
Time.
My mum has it, so when she has an alone moment, she can just sit down and watch it, and she can cry or laugh or whatever she wants to do. But and people abroad then as well. My sister flew in, but now when she goes home, she can scan it, look at it, and it's a memory for her as well.
There's a little business plan for you.
No business plan. They're all my freebies. But I think what I'm taking from that is just be creative in death and celebrate the way you. And if you want to have it, listen. Here's the funny part of this. Like I do laugh about it. Like in the crematorium. Like we're here in I think it was called the Garden Chapel, maybe, or the Garden Room is what's called. So we're here having this funeral, but then there's people over, like a completely different funeral over in the Victorian Room, I think it's called. They were having like straight-laced, everyone's in black, everyone's serious, everybody's crying. Meanwhile, over here, the Barrys are laughing, and we've got colourful, and we've somber moments as well, of course.
Of course.
But I just think people need to know, like, there doesn't have to be, there doesn't have to be just one way in death. There's many ways,
Keith, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to this episode. You can find us on SoundCloud and wherever you get your podcasts every Tuesday. You can join our online community on Facebook, The Grief Pod, or on Insta @GriefPod Series.